I used to think worry was productive. That if I just thought about the problem hard enough, turned it over in my mind 1,000 times, I'd somehow find peace. But it never came. I'd lie in bed rehearsing worst-case scenarios, preparing myself for everything that could possibly go wrong. And yet, the more I worried, the heavier I felt. It never fixed tomorrow, it just ruined today. That's the trap, isn't it? We convince ourselves that worry is a form of responsibility, that it shows we care, or that we're in control. But really, it's the opposite. Worry is a thief. It steals our joy, our sleep, our clarity. And the most dangerous part, it convinces us that we're alone in the struggle, like it's all on us. But then something shifted. I remember one moment in particular, sitting alone, stressed about things I couldn't fix, replaying conversations, projecting outcomes. And I felt this question rise up inside me. What if you trusted God the same way you trust your fear? That hit me hard. I had been giving more faith to my worries than to the one who holds the future. That realization was a gut punch. Because if I'm being honest, my worry was rooted in pride. I thought I had to carry everything. I thought I had to figure it all out. But God never asked me to be the solution. He asked me to trust Him. And trust doesn't mean I pretend the problems aren't real. It means I believe they're not bigger than Him. That's when I started making a conscious shift. Instead of reaching for my phone first thing in the morning, I started reaching for peace. I'd whisper, God, I don't know what today holds, but I know you're already there. And that changed everything. It didn't erase the problems, but it did remove the panic. Because here's the truth, worry can't stop tomorrow's pain, it can only steal today's strength. And when I started letting go of what I couldn't control, I started to feel free. I realized that while I was exhausting myself trying to fix the future, God was already working it out. He's not limited by time. What's unknown to me is already settled for Him. There were still moments I felt anxiety creeping back in. The temptation to overthink, to panic, to spiral, it didn't vanish overnight. But I started replacing those thoughts with reminders that God is for me. He's with me. He's ahead of me. That became my new rhythm. Less fear, more faith, less control, more surrender. And something amazing happened. As my trust in God grew, so did my peace. I stopped trying to predict outcomes. I stopped scripting tragedies that hadn't happened. I started showing up to life with open hands, not clenched fists. That made me more present, more grounded, more alive. It's wild how much we miss when we're buried in worry. Conversations, beauty, joy, they slip right past us because our minds are elsewhere. But when you choose trust over anxiety, the fog lifts. You start noticing God's fingerprints everywhere, in a kind word, a closed door, even in your unanswered prayers. I think we forget that peace isn't the absence of problems, it's the presence of God. It's the quiet confidence that no matter what comes, you won't face it alone. And that confidence doesn't come from control, it comes from surrender. That's where real strength lies. I've also learned that trust is a daily decision. It's not a one-time switch you flip and forget. It's a choice you make every morning to believe that God's grace is enough for today and His plan is better than your fear. Some days the choice feels easy. Other days it feels like war, but it's always worth it. And here's the thing, trusting God doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what was never yours to bear. It means you admit that you're human, and that's okay. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to stay close to the one who does. So now, when worry knocks, I don't answer the door with panic. I answer it with prayer. I remind myself that God's track record is flawless, that the same God who saw me through before will do it again, and again, and again. Worry still tries to creep in. But now I know better. I know it's not my job to manage tomorrow. It's my job to be faithful today, to trust even when I don't understand, to rest even when the future is unclear, to worship even when I'm tempted to worry. Because the truth is, you can't do both at the same time. You can't worship and worry. One always drowns out the other, and I've made my choice. I'm done feeding the fear. I'm choosing trust, because I'd rather walk with God into the unknown than stand still in fear trying to control what was never mine. So if you're feeling weighed down by the what ifs, the deadlines, the fear of the future, breathe. Let go. Trust that God is already ahead of you. He's already working, already protecting, already preparing. You're not late, you're not lost. You're not alone. He's got you. And that's enough. I've had seasons where God felt completely silent. I'd pray, and it was like my words hit the ceiling and bounced right back. I wasn't angry. just empty. I'd show up, do the right thing, say the right prayers, and still feel like nothing was moving. It was frustrating, lonely. Honestly, I started to wonder if I was doing something wrong, or worse, if he just walked away. But here's what I didn't see back then. Just because I couldn't feel anything didn't mean God wasn't doing something. In fact, some of his most powerful moves in my life were happening when I felt the least. That's the crazy part. Faith isn't built in moments of clarity, it's built in moments of silence. We're so used to noise, we want signs, emotions, instant answers. And when we don't get them, we assume God is absent. But he's not. He's working behind the curtain, in the shadows, in the layers we can't see yet. He's orchestrating conversations we don't hear, opening doors we haven't reached, shifting hearts we haven't even met. And it's only later, sometimes much later, that we realize everything we were waiting for was already in motion. I remember a time I was desperate for breakthrough. I needed answers, clarity. I needed something to change. I was fasting, praying, doing everything I could to get God's attention. But it felt like nothing was happening. Then, months later, everything shifted in a single week. Phone calls came, opportunities opened, relationships aligned. It felt sudden, but it wasn't. It was the result of months of unseen work, his work. That taught me something. Deep silence is not absence. Delay is not denial. And waiting doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means something is happening that you're not ready to see yet. God's timing isn't based on your panic. It's based on your purpose. I used to want to see the whole map. I wanted the why, the when, and the how all lined up before I took a step. But God rarely gives you the full picture, because then you wouldn't need faith. And that's what he's really after. Not your comfort, not your understanding, your trust. And trust is messy. It's that raw, shaky, sometimes tear-filled belief that says, I don't see it, I don't feel it, but I believe you're still working. That's the kind of faith that changes you. That's the kind of faith that invites God to do the impossible. Looking back, some of the biggest blessings in my life came from doors that looked like they were shut forever. Job opportunities I thought I lost, only to be replaced with something far better. Relationships I begged God to save, only to realize he was protecting me from something I couldn't see. Delays that felt like punishments, but turned out to be divine timing. All of it was him, quiet, strategic, faithful. One of the hardest things to accept is that God doesn't operate on emotion. He's not moved by your panic attacks or deadlines. He's moved by your faith, and even more, he's moved by his love for you. He sees the long game, the bigger picture. He knows what's ahead, and sometimes what feels like a no is actually a not yet. Or even better, wait, I have something greater. But we rarely believe that in the moment, because we want to feel him. We want the goosebumps, the confirmation texts, the overnight miracles. But sometimes the silence is the miracle, because in the silence, he's growing you, maturing you, teaching you to rely on his word, not your emotions. I've learned to stop measuring God's presence by how I feel. Emotions are fleeting, but his word, that never changes. He promised to never leave me, and that includes the silent seasons, the dry ones, the confusing ones, especially those. And now, when I walk through those quiet seasons, I don't panic like I used to. I pause. I remind myself that what I feel is not the full story, that the God who parted seas and moved mountains is still at work, even when I feel nothing. And that kind of faith, that's when it gets real. Because you don't need faith when everything is obvious. You need it when nothing makes sense. You need it when the job is gone, the door is closed, the prayer feels unanswered. That's when you say, even here, even now, I believe you're working. And maybe that's exactly where God wants you. Not in control, not with everything figured out, but surrendered, dependent, fully leaning on him, not because you feel him, but because you know him. So if you're in that silent stretch right now, if you're doing all the right things and still feeling nothing, take heart. The silence is not punishment. It's preparation, it's protection, it's God behind the scenes setting up something you're not ready to carry yet. He's not late. He's not ignoring you. He's building something bigger than you imagined. And when it finally comes together, when it clicks, when it shows up, when the dots connect, you'll realize it didn't just happen. He was working the whole time, quietly, faithfully, perfectly. You're not forgotten. You're not being punished. You're being positioned. Keep walking. Keep praying. Keep trusting. God is still writing. There's a moment in every journey of faith when logic fails, when every step forward feels like a step into darkness. No road signs, no safety net, just silence. And in that moment, you have two choices: freeze in fear or walk anyway. That's what faith really is. Not a feeling, not a vibe. Faith is motion. Faith is movement even when the floor beneath you isn't visible. I've lived that. I remember a season where everything familiar fell apart. The job, the relationship, the plans, all gone. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff and God was saying, jump. And I was screaming back, where? There's nothing there. But deep down, I knew what he was really saying. Trust me, I'll catch you. Just walk. But how do you walk when nothing makes sense? How do you move forward when everything in you wants to retreat? That's the tension of real faith. It's not about feeling brave. It's about taking shaky steps with a steady belief that God knows what you don't. See, we like control. We love clarity. We want guarantees. We want God to send the blueprint first. Then we'll obey. But he doesn't work like that. He says, go, and waits to see if we actually will. He doesn't always part the CE before you step. Sometimes the C only parts E because you did. That's the terrifying beauty of faith. It's a relationship, not a contract. There's no checklist, no guarantees. Just trust. You walk and he moves. You step and he shows up, but not a second earlier. He waits for your obedience before he reveals his provision. I've had to walk when I didn't know where the money was coming from. I've had to walk when my heart was broken, when the direction was unclear, when my confidence was gone. But every time, and I mean I'm you every time, God met me there. Not always the way I expected, but always exactly how I needed. And I've learned that if you're waiting until you feel ready, you'll never move. Faith doesn't wait for comfort. It's born in discomfort. It grows in uncertainty. It thrives in the unknown. That's why the walk matters more than the destination. Because it's during the walk that you learn who God really is. People think miracles happen in the spotlight, but most of them start in the dark. Abraham left his home without a map. Peter stepped out of the boat with no life jacket. Jesus went to the cross without any proof that we'd love him back. Faith has always been a walk into the unseen. And that's where the breakthrough lies. Just past your comfort zone. Just beyond your logic. Just outside your plan. God's best is never behind you. It's always ahead. But you'll never see it if you're glued to what's safe. I get it. Safety feels good. But safety never stretched anyone. Comfort never builds character. If you want to see God do what only can, you've got to be willing to do what you've never done. To walk without seeing, to trust without knowing, to move without answers. And here's the thing, you won't always feel strong. You'll doubt. You'll wrestle. You'll probably cry. That doesn't make your faith weak. It makes it real. Doesn't mean the absence of fear. It means the refusal to let fear decide. Some of the strongest steps I've taken were taken with trembling hands and a racing heart, but they were steps. And God honored them. He didn't ask for perfection. He asked for motion, for obedience, for trust. One of the most powerful prayers I've ever prayed was also the simplest. God, I don't see the floor, but I'll walk anyway. And when I did, the floor showed up, just enough for the next step. Not the whole staircase, just the next one. And that's all he promises. Daily bread, not a lifetime supply. Enough grace for today. Enough strength for this moment. And that's enough. Looking back, I realized that the times I felt the most lost were actually the times I was closest to purpose. Because when you can't see the floor, you're forced to rely on the one who laid the foundation. You stop trusting your senses and start trusting his word. That's when the walk becomes holly. And not because it's easy, but because it's honest. And now, when life throws me into another unknown, I don't panic like I used to. I pause, I breathe, I remind myself, this is where faith lies. Not in comfort, but in courage. Not in certainty, but in surrender. I don't have to see the whole path. I just have to trust the one leading me. So if you're there right now, standing on the edge, unsure, scared, I see you. I've been you. And I promise the floor will show up. Maybe not when you want. Maybe not how you expect. But God is too faithful to leave you hanging. Take the step. Even if your voice shakes, even if your knees tremble, take the step. Because faith means walking even when you don't see the floor. And that's when everything starts to change. There was a point in my life where worry was my constant companion. It followed me into the shower, sat next to me at dinner, tucked me into bed at night. I'd smile on the outside, say, I'm fine, when people asked, but inside I was carrying the weight of 1,000 what ifs. What if I fail? What if I'm not enough? What if things don't work out? I thought I was being responsible. I told myself I was just being prepared. But what I didn't realize was that worry had quietly become my God. I was giving it my attention, my energy, my emotions, everything that belonged to God. And the more I focused on my fear, the more distant he felt. One day, I heard someone say, "You can't worry and worship at the same time." And it stopped me. I didn't even need a deep explanation. I just knew it was true. Because worry and worship come from two totally different places. Worry is rooted in fear. Worship is rooted in trust. One assumes you're alone, the other declares you're not. I started thinking about what I did when I was overwhelmed. I'd pace. I'd overthink. I'd scroll. I'd isolate. But I rarely worshipped. I rarely paused to say, "God, I trust you anyway." I was reacting to my fear, not responding with faith, so I decided to test it. The next time anxiety started creeping in, heart racing, mind spinning, I stopped. I took a breath. And instead of feeding the fear, I turned on worship music. Not to feel better. Not as a trick, but to refocus, and something happened. My situation didn't change, but my perspective did. The room didn't get brighter, but my heart did. And in that shift, I felt peace. That's the thing about worship. It doesn't always change your surroundings, but it always changes your soul. Because when you worship, you're realigning yourself. You're saying, "God, you're bigger than this. You're still in control. Even if nothing changes, I'm choosing you over my panic." And that choice is powerful. I used to think worship was just singing at church, but now I see it so much more. It's a posture. It's a weapon. It's what happens when you take your eyes off the chaos and lock them onto the Creator. Worry whispers, "It's all falling apart." Worship shouts, "He's holding it all together." There's no neutral ground. You're either fueling one or the other. The mind is a battleground, and every thought is casting a vote. Am I going to magnify my fear or magnify my God? And I get it. Sometimes worship feels fake when you're afraid. But that's actually when it's most real. When you raise your hands through the tears, when you declare His goodness through the pain, that's raw faith. That's authentic worship, not because you feel strong, but because you're choosing to trust anyway. Worry is loud, but worship silences it, not instantly, not magically, but steadily. Worry shrinks your world down to your problems. Worship expands it to God's promises. I remember being stuck in a financial situation that made no sense. Bills were piling up, work was slow, everything in me wanted to spiral. But I made a decision I would worship. Not to manipulate God, but to remind myself who He is. I sang songs I didn't feel. I prayed prayers that felt weak. But I stayed there. I kept going. And over time, my heart shifted. Peace returned. And eventually, provision did too. Not always in the way I expected, but always in the way I needed. That moment taught me something deeper. Worship isn't about pretending everything's okay. It's about anchoring to the truth when everything's not. It's not denial, it's defiance. A spiritual rebellion against the lies of fear. A declaration that says, "Even now, I know who my God is." You can't fill your lungs with praise and fear at the same time. One has to give. And more often than not, when you choose to worship, the worry loses its grip. It might still whisper, but it won't own you. And now, when stress creeps in, and it still does, I know the battle plan. I don't let it build a nest in my mind, I shift. I worship, I open my mouth and remind my soul who's in charge. Not my circumstances, not my doubts, but the same God who's carried me before and who will carry me again. So if you're in that place right now, overwhelmed, uncertain, restless, don't try to think your way out, don't numb it, don't overanalyze it. Worship your way through. Play that song, speak that promise. Even if your voice shakes, let it speak louder than your fear. You don't have to fake strength, you just have to choose surrender. Worry and worship can't coexist. One always pushes the other out, and today I choose worship again and again and again. Because even when I don't feel it, I know He's worthy, and that reminder alone is enough to keep me going.